Good evening. Welcome to Elyria City Council meeting for Monday, April 15th, 2024. At this time, we'll do a moment of reflective silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. April 15th, 2024. This time, we'll do a moment. Mr. Armstrong, would you please lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Phillips, can we have the roll call, please? Here. 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 Here.
Davis? Here. Mr. Werka? Here. Mr. Lippian? We have a letter prepared. Mr. Collette?
Here.
Present one. Absent one.
So we have an excused absence for Clerk Lotko and an excused absence for Mr. Lippian. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Public hearings?
There are none. There are none.
Okay. Yeah, your mic's not, doesn't seem to be what?
There are none.
There you go. Okay, can I get a approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Remarks and reports of the city officials. Mayor Brubaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Two quick items. One, I want to thank the Elyria Police Department, Elyria Fire Department, and our city employees in the service side of things for their preparation for last Monday's eclipse. They were well prepared. Obviously, we didn't have any issues, but I think that was partly because there wasn't as many people as they said were coming into our community, but also because our police and fire and our service people were well prepared. So thank you to them for that. And also Director Pinowski for working alongside our safety forces to make sure that our residents were safe and people were in place to respond when needed. Also today is something called National Public Safety Telecommunications Week, which we call it as Dispatchers Week. So I want to publicly acknowledge our dispatchers over at the Elyria Police Department. Obviously, we have the 911 as well, but specifically our Elyria Police Department dispatchers who do a phenomenal job. There are a lot of things scheduled at the police department this week to support them, from luncheons and cookies and all those different types of things, but I appreciate we currently have 11 dispatchers of the 12. One has left. One is leaving this week to move to another part of the state. So we'll be down to 10 full-time dispatchers, but we have put out an ad for the 11th and 12th. But we do appreciate the hard work that they do every day. So that's my report this evening, and any questions if there are any.
Any questions for the mayor? Very good. Safety Service Director, Mr. Pinowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, just want to let everybody know that we have promoted Chris Parker effective next Monday. Parks and Rec Public Works Supervisor position, which we came to you previously and had created. We saw an opportunity to add an additional manager to oversee some of our maintenance folks in both cemeteries and parks, and we think that that'll make them more efficient and make the work get done a little bit more efficiently. And it was a good investment of some resources to improve just how things are getting done and how they're organized. So Mr. Parker will be moving into that role beginning of next pay period. And one of the things that we kind of were faced when we got here was with a CDL issue, and that's training for some of our employees. Some of our employees were hired with the expectation of getting a CDL for their position, and we had some other positions that CDL is necessary, A or B. And so there was some talk about a training program being created and so forth and so on. We've made some progress, and we're looking at working with one of our neighboring communities in their training program to get some of our folks trained and get their licenses. But we should have a report back on that with some conclusion as to whether that's going to be an option in the near future. So I'll let you know.
Very good. Any questions for State Ms. Sawerka?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Parker's role currently is at the building department, so you'll be backfilling that?
We are discussing that at this point, yes. Last year, there was an additional PMC employee added, so we're evaluating whether we still need that. So we are looking at that and figuring out what the needs are to make that decision, but we are contemplating that, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Finance Director Pulaski.
No report, Mr. President.
Any questions for the Finance Director? Law Director Deary.
Thank you, through you, Mr. President. No report this evening.
Okay. Police Department, Chief Pelko. Any questions for Chief Pelko? Mr. Oswald?
Not questions, but I would like you to follow through with what I'm going to mention. And recently, I was trying to get some drone footage of our river, okay? Started off a call with Chief Pernesti and then got into, which Chief Pelko's a hard guy to knuckle down to. You get in his office, always, everyone's busy. But got hooked up with a guy named Richard Buckway, who's the drone guy. Okay, I was trying to get footage of the Black River when it was storming and raging high, and he went out of his way to really help me out, and I got an education on what these drones can do. You don't usually put them up in 40-mile-an-hour winds. That's the one thing. And when they couldn't do it Friday, I was going to call him on Saturday and say, you know what, it's going to be too bad. Just hold off. And he says, well, you know what, I got up in the morning, Saturday morning, and he flew that drone. He got me all these pictures. It's going to set me up. And so I just thought that was great, and I appreciate that, and I want to thank him personally. The other thing that I learned is we have a lot more drones. And I know when the first time come, when we voted on giving the money to buy these 2 drones on what they can do, now we have a few more. He was enlightening me on what these drones can do now. And they share them with, you know, the fire department, the police department, you know, they check the water towers. Sometimes if they have an emergency and they go to another city, we help each other out with our drones. But he said we have one that will fly inside house. So if you can expand on anything, but I just thought that was great, that people should know how their money is being spent very wisely, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Chief?
Yeah, through you, Mr. President. Yeah, so we just purchased 2 drones that will fly inside. So that'll help us if we think we have a situation go on inside a residence where instead of us going in there, we can fly the drones inside the residence. They're brand new. We just got them probably 2 weeks ago, so we're still learning and training with them. But on top of that, I think we have 4 other drones that we can fly outside and that are thermal imaging as well. So, and we share it with other departments. We responded to numerous other departments and helped them out on various things as well, and fire as well.
Chief, are you able to say how many are licensed or able to fly the drones?
Yeah, so you have to have a license through the FAA. I think we have 10 drone operators right now that got to go through a week-long course, and then they have to pass a test to get their license to fly.
Very good. Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President. And I was just told by my colleague to say that it was for the golf course where we flew on a Black River, where I'm worried about the safety of residents if we do happen to build homes in there. So that was why we were getting that. And I got good information from Shane Stewart also. So everybody's always very helpful when I'm trying to get information, and then you always learn something. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I will say, Sam Jacobs, he's the one who's purchasing most of the drones for us, and we'll inspect the water towers for him as well. I think we got 3 or 4 water towers that we're gonna be inspecting for him soon to help save some money as well.
Very good. Mr. Werka?
Thank you, through you. I was just curious, do you have a dedicated officer keeping track of all this, the video footage, the cameras? Do you have somebody dedicated to all that, and do they do the drone footage as well?
Yeah, so whenever they fly their drone, they'll download the footage, and we maintain it for evidence purposes.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President. And again, that's what I was asking Mr. Buckway. I says, okay, now, I don't know if I'm actually allowed to come in here and ask you to do this. He goes, we won't do anything unless we're allowed to do it, and you have to have clearance and all that. So again, I know it goes through the channels, but thanks again.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you. Larry Fire Department, Chief Pronesti.
Good evening. I just wanted to give you, obviously, the mayor and the director talked a little bit about the eclipse that went off without an incident. We were well prepared, so I wanted to thank the city for allowing us to increase our staffing. Hopefully, there is maybe some opportunities for recouping some of the overtime costs with the state, but we'll see as we move forward. We also had an incident that took place on Wednesday where there was too much what's called mercaptan, which is the odor that you smell. And there was some discussion. We got hit pretty hard, but not as hard as some other communities. Parma, I just talked to their chief. They responded on 246 calls in about a 5-hour period. We responded on roughly 140, roughly. You know, it's just one of those things that Columbia Gas is still investigating. They do not put, just so if your constituents ask you, not Columbia Gas who puts that odorant into the lines. It's another company that puts that in. When I talked to them, the one thing that I talked to them today at length, and one of the other things is why some communities got hit harder than others. It's just the way the transmissions go. Also, most of our calls were in older homes, and we were able to detect several leaks. Even though they were minute, the increase in mercaptan made that leak at, let's say, a stove or hot water tank show itself. And so we did provide quite a service, but I wanted to commend, it beat any other busy day by far in the history of the fire department. My guys handled everything professionally, and really, we sometimes take for granted, but when they show up to work, they never know what they're going to have, and they had one heck of a day, and I just wanted to publicly commend the crews that were working that day.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief Pronesti? Mr. Tolet.
Not so much. We have some scouts here tonight. Just so you're aware, natural gas doesn't have a smell at all in its natural form. So they add what's it called, Jim?
Mercaptan.
They add a scent to it so that people just in the event, and they put too much into it. So just, I hope that made sense to you guys. So great job, Chief. Thank you.
Mr. Werka?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I just want to comment that it's great that we responded and we found some leaks, because it's the same sort of story that we find with like water leaks as well. Sometimes they go on for a very long time till we are aware of them. And so in this case, especially with a gas leak, I mean, any little spark, I'm just curious, Chief, and you may or may not know the answer to this. I noticed that the laundry mat on East River is closed, has closed signs in it, and I wondered if they had plumbing problems as a result of the notification.
I can check and see if we responded. I know the largest places that we responded to was the Wesleyan Village. We responded for a leak, and we actually had an issue there. I don't know. I will find out and I can get that to you.
If through you, Mr. President, will Columbia Gas give us a report of how many leaks were detected or fixed or recommended to be fixed?
They will. The rough estimate right now was that they had 1,700 calls up until 11 p.m. on Thursday. So from about 3 or 4 p.m. on Thursday to 11, they had 1,700 calls for service. How many of those were actual leaks? They will get that to us. Again, they will have a report, and the gentleman I spoke to even said that he'll have a report, but he'll even come to the individual council meetings of the cities hit the hardest as far as giving a detailed report.
One follow-up, Mr. President. Is there a consequence to this third-party supplier for doing this? I mean, if we at the water plant put in something, there would be a consequence. Is there a consequence to this?
I'm not sure. I will be talking with the safety director. I believe that there will be some, as far as cost recovery. The gentleman from Columbia Gas, that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
But they're still going to put their report together, but they're still chasing calls on this.
Mr. Tolet?
Through you, Mr. President, do you think this was a bad thing or a good thing that it happened?
Well,
And could we suggest that we plan
oh God,
it?
no. I mean, I guess.
Did we save 3 homes from exploding?
Oh, yeah, well, I would say this, that things got so crazy that I ended up coming in and I went on numerous calls. And the calls that I went on, we did have a leak. They were smaller leaks, but you just don't know. So yeah, I would say, I wouldn't want to plan this, but I know what you're saying, that it was a good thing because we did find several leaks that we were able to either shut off at the appliance, or in the worst case scenario, we had unfortunately to shut the gas off. That's the other thing. You know, we can't make up a policy on the fly. When my firemen come into work at 8 o'clock in the morning, they have a strict set of rules and policies that keep them safe and keep the citizens safe. They had to fall back on our natural gas emergency policy until, until otherwise. So we had to respond like we did. And when we found a problem, we couldn't just say, well, it's small, we shut it off. So, yeah, I would say yes, and I didn't mean to chuckle,
It's an unfair
but-
question, I know it is, but if we planned it so all the calls went to Columbia Gas so that we could find these leaks.
Yeah, the other issue that, and again, the report will come, here's one thing that you need to keep in mind. Every jurisdiction is going to be different. I'll give you a great example. Parma. Parma ran on, 300 or 246 calls. The difference is in the city of Parma, when you call 911 in the city of Parma, it's police and fire and EMS all in one jurisdiction in Parma Police. So they're able to make decisions on the fly and say, we're going to go to this, we're not going to go to that. Call this person back, because the calls are funneled into the dispatch at Parma Police. In our case, the people who are calling 911, the 911 dispatcher, once they start typing, 123 Hilliard, natural gas, an automated tone that many of you heard me complain and want, well, we have it, and it works fantastic. The problem is it's nonstop. That automatic dispatch is just rolling and rolling and rolling. We don't have a representative at 911. We do not control the 911 system like at Parma. So we couldn't just say, hold on, we'll go here, we'll go there. So it was very hectic, and that automated dispatcher voice just kept pumping out the emergencies. We got to go. So, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things.
Ms. Davis?
Through you, Mr. Pelez, was there a specific area that this was happening to in the city?
No.
I thought something was going on in my house. I ignored it. Darn.
No, it was, well,
Might want to get that checked.
Yeah.
I will say this, and not to keep going, but newer houses, newer lines may not be as big as a problem. Elyria is an old city. We have old houses. I would say unscientifically, but if I went back and looked at the data of the addresses that we responded to, most were of what we would call legacy construction, older homes. We only went to a few newer construction. So, just the way it is.
Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President, I guess in follow-up to Mr. Tillett's question, did it save lives? Well, Wednesday night, I got a call on the landlord, and one of my tenants called me. She said she walked in the door and smelled this god-awful smell, and she then found out something was going on. She called the gas company. They come over and turn the gas off. So the landlord had to go over and take care of a leak. But we did have 2 leaks. So she had been there, I think she's been living there for at least 5 years, and it was leaking this whole time. So could it have saved life? Yes, it could have saved a life. So I didn't like to go over there and have to take care of that, but I'm glad I did, and they're all safe and sound, and so, thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your report. While Ms. Connor's over there, we'll go to Ms. Connor. Okay, Mr. Jacob, water pumping. Chief Building Official, Mr. Farkas.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. Just a report on the Huntington Bank, the EFIS collapse. I reached out to the ownership, Mr. Van Warmer. He indicated that he has contractors coming out to do a bid and inspect the rest of the wall to make sure that it's structurally sound. Apparently, they did find some additional loose material that they removed. How far up it goes, they just don't know yet, but it is in motion. I also thanked him for his quick turnaround in regards to cleanup and taking care of that situation. The vehicle accident on West River, going through the home and clipping a neighbor's porch, we are currently working with that particular site to secure and arrange repairs. The hotels, I will start with Days Inn. That one is still in motion. We have that one in process. Motel 9 is under repair. They are working slowly but surely. The Journey Inn, that one has reared, again, more property maintenance concerns. There were couches and mattresses, I'm assuming from interior of the facility. Don't know how they came out, but I'm reaching out to the ownership to ask for an update in regards to the sales of that particular site, because it was supposed to have been sold by now. I do have an active order that I've held back in a cooperative attempt to get resolved. We don't know what their progress is. But I will check on that to update the panel. Quick round of demolitions, 412 Bell. We had an ownership come out and indicate that they are repairing it. They did acquire a demolition permit. They are going to save the structure. Mrs. Davis, you're looking at me. So they are going, actually, the order was issued and they have a strict deadline to follow. If it's not adhered, I already have the abatement and contractors lined up to eliminate that concern. 429 Huron is right on its coattails. 328 18th Street, also, the abatement is underway this week. And 1848 Middle was an emergency demolition for a garage. That structure, you couldn't tell from the road, but we did receive a call and the back portion has collapsed. That one is also in motion and coming down. Lastly, 381, 382 Furnace. We had some attorneys come out for the ownership. We do have to start over on that one, unfortunately, but that is in motion. And that is it.
Ms. Davis, if you wanted to comment about earlier.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was at 412 Bell today, and I was really floored by the fact that they was trying to save it. Because, did you notice how the roof is caving in?
Yes, ma'am. They want to use the word scalp the upper floor. save the walls below. I give them effort for trying. I don't know if it's possible, but that is their attempt to save it. I don't know if upon removing all that, it may be too far gone and they could choose to demolish it completely, but that is their intent.
Through you, Mr. So I hope that we have inspectors out there
Oh, yeah.
checking, watching what they're doing to try to save a cover-up.
Trust me, we're on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Worker, did you have a comment?
If I could, through you, Mr. Farkas, you mentioned Furnace. Is Furnace the property that the county health department is got involved in?
To my knowledge, Mr. Chair, through you to Mary, I don't know if that is a particular site they've taken on. I know 382 was recently purchased and up for sale, and we get this where they flip the houses and try to roll it to the next owner, but we're on that one as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Armstrong?
Through you, President. 1848 Middle, did the family member reach out to you? Because from what I understand, she's trying to get ownership so she can handle the situation.
Mr. Chair, through you, that is news to me. They have not.
Thank you.
Chief Pronesti, did you want to?
362, I think. Yeah, 326, yeah.
Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President. Mr. Farkas, I know we've had many conversations. As Mr. Pronesti, as far as these inspections on these buildings, okay? It first started with, I know you told me you've done over 700 inspections. We talked lately that we need to get together with yourself and the building department about these inspections, especially in these commercial buildings. When we've seen this EIFS product is a product that they've done 25 years ago when they had issues, now we're seeing some of this blowing off. Well, the problem is that they get saturated, like what happened, it's like a sponge, and then this big heavy sponge gets some wind and it's gone. We've had 3. That one on Huntington, the one in the building, strip mall next to Planet Fitness, and a building that was currently Bodemer's across the street, okay? Those are all those products. Now, they're hard. You can't have, how do you get people to inspect? But I think we need to do a better job of getting together and seeing what we can do as far as getting some form of an inspection regularly going on. And I don't know that answer because if I was owner, I don't want somebody telling me what to do. But at the time when something's blowing off like this and we know that you have that product, then you should be watching. If somebody has that product on their building right now, I would be going out and inspecting it to make sure that it was in good shape. We need to do a better job, and I know that the administration's got a lot on their plate, but when we can finally get together and figure out how we can get a good inspection program done. So we just said, we've got an old city. And it needs help, and we got to keep an eye on it so that this stuff doesn't happen. So if we can get together sometime and try to figure these out, that would be great. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, can you give me an update on Moen, please?
Mr. President, through you, to my knowledge, I have heard nothing in regards to that particular project. Again, no application has been submitted. It's still in court.
Mr. President, through you, so what is our recourse? We have been waiting patiently, me not so much, but we've been waiting patiently for them to do something, and they're doing nothing. All I want is a fence so that the neighbors that live in that area don't have to look at that mess every day.
Mr. President, through you to Mrs. Mitchell, I'll defer to Amanda on that one.
Through you, Mr. President, this is a very basic question, but Mr. Farkas, zoning or any other is it required that they have fencing?
Mr. Chair, through you, yes.
Then I would say send it to my office and
It is.
after you cite the violation.
Mr. President, through you, it is in court.
Okay,
It has
well
been
then,
referred. so it's in motion.
Okay, thank you. I stand corrected. Unfortunately then, if they are currently being prosecuted, then we have to let that stand its course. I am not opposed, however, since every day is a separate offense, that you cite them again, and then we send over additional charges, because unfortunately, the only way that these commercial entities feel it is financially. So I will not be overly optimistic that it will end, with the results that we want. But right now, that, again, Mrs. Mitchell, you asked what our recourse is. That's what I would suggest. And if we are asked, what one of their options is, we say, look, you need screening. You need the adequate screening.
Mr. President, if I may, it would be different if this just started. This has been going on for years, and we just keep, not we per se, but it just keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And in the meantime, the neighbors are frustrated, and they're angry, and they're calling me, and I'm like, it's in the courts, because I don't know what else to tell them. And I just don't think that's fair. So I agree with Mrs. Deary. If you can cite them every single day, cite them every single day. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you to Mrs. Mitchell, the order stands pat. Every violation listed is a separate offense and separate charge. I do believe it's $250 per charge per day. It is entirely up to the judges to enforce that. All I can do is recommend they do, as the law director indicated, to make an understanding that we need to address this. But I'm with you, Mrs. Mitchell. It's every day I get phone calls about it, what's going on. So,
Thank you. Mr. Schneider?
Through you, Mr. President, to Chief Building Official Farkas. I know you had mentioned recently that you had a vacancy with inspector in your department. Any luck on filling that, or where are you at on that process?
Mr. Chair, through you, yeah, the building department's taken a hit. We're losing a valuable asset, Mr. Parker. And also with the shortage of Mr. Hughes as an inspector position, we are currently in search of. We do have one applicant that has submitted and meets the qualifications. All that's needed is to sit down and do an interview. We have branched out through HR to other prospects in hopes of getting a return. So we're still looking.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Farkas? Thank you, Mr. Farkas. Mr. Schneider, City Engineer. Any questions for Mr. Schneider? I know that Ms. Scott isn't here, but I think Mr. Oswald wanted to make a comment in regards to community development, more specifically the beautification. Is that what that was for?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Scott couldn't be here, and so she was hoping that I could just give you an update on the Spruce Up Elyria project. And we launched the program the first week of April. We provided approximately 50 applications to date. There's been 13 applications that they've received to date for about $55,000. The anticipation of an estimated 50 homes is what they'll be able to take care of. And you can call the Community Development Department. They'll provide some notices on social media and a city website if you want to get on there and see how you can sign up, what you can do, and when the funds will be exhausted. And just had conversation on this program, and I just hope that we can continue it. You know, this is one of our big things, just like we're seeing these problems going on with our homes. We can start fixing up our homes. It's a win-win situation for the city, and I hope we are able to continue it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, very good. President's referrals and remonstrances. Item number 1, community development. Item number 2, finance. Item number 3, finance and utilities. Item number 4, utilities. Item number 5, utilities. Item number 6, utilities. Item number 7, utilities. Item number 8, utilities. Items 9 through 10, received and placed on the file in the clerk's office. Petitions and remonstrances from the lobby.
There are none.
Petitions and remarks from council members.
There are none.
Reports of standing and special committees.
There are none.
Resolutions first reading.
A resolution approving a list submitted by the Safety Service Director for the collection of delinquent inactive utility accounts and directing the Clerk of Council to certify said accounts to the Lorraine County Auditor.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this resolution be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2024-14. A resolution finding that the city has unfit for municipal use certain city property.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this resolution be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2024-15.
Resolutions, that's the end of the first readings. Resolutions second reading.
There are none.
Resolutions third reading.
There are none.
Ordinances first reading.
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director for the City of Elyria to dispose of city property that is unfit for municipal use.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-61. An ordinance accepting the dedication of certain lands, easements, and rights of way for the installation of streets and utilities as provided for in the final plat of Harvest Meadows Subdivision Number 3.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Tolet. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-62. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to purchase up to 5 Ford Utility Interceptor vehicles or similar type and necessary equipment for same for the Elyria Police Department through a participating purchasing program authorized by the state of Ohio and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
I have a question.
Mr. Worker, question?
Through you, what's the turnaround time to get these? Is this a long-term wait on these police vehicles, or are they things in stock? Just curious.
Elka.
Just curious. And I apologize if this was discussed at
That's
the
okay.
committee meeting and I
You weren't
wasn't
here.
here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's understand.
So Ford is redoing their whole process on how you order vehicles. So in order for us to order cars for 2025, we have to order them this year ahead of time. So I don't know if I heard all of your question, but we've got to order them now. The bidding process is open now, and I think it closes in June sometime, but they could close it at any time. So we wanted to ask for emergency for that reason.
I guess it was a lead time, Chief.
Yeah, I wondered when we would, through you, I wondered when we would actually get these.
Not till 2025, and I don't know an exact time.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Questions have been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-63. An ordinance amending ordinance number 2024-39 to increase the authorized amount for the purchase of a new pumper truck for the fire department through the state purchasing program or equivalent program and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Snyder. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-64. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for tree services for the city of Elyria and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-65. An ordinance authorizing the finance director to create a new special revenue fund.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-66. An ordinance authorizing the finance director to transfer funds to the specified account.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-67. An ordinance amending number 2024-46, known as the 2024 Permanent Appropriations Ordinance, to change funds in various accounts.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-68. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for paving projects at various parks in the city of Elyria and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-69. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for repair and maintenance at the North Park Ice Arena and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Werka?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wondered, who determined the repairing, cleaning, and is that been done by engineering? Was that a third party that came in and gave us a quote for this work? Again, it may have been discussed at the committee meeting.
We're on the committee over and through there. I was, as is the chairwoman Mitchell, I think it was, Ms. Reardon came in and kind of made her presentation. Honestly, if it was a third party, we're not aware of, but we can get you that information.
Okay, thank
in
you.
regards to that. Is there any further discussion?
Call for the question.
Mayor Brubaker, did you want to weigh in on that?
No, you were good. Mr. Strozak and someone from engineering looked at that.
Okay.
And determined the need.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-70. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the addition of a baseball field at South Park and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Armstrong. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-71. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the development of the West Avenue Pocket Park and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Armstrong. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2472. Those are all the ordinances first reading.
Ordinance is second reading.
An ordinance amending Elyria Codified Ordinance Section 937.20, alternative consumption calculation for sanitary sewer account holders served by a water system other than the Elyria Municipal Water Supply System, and declaring an emergency.
I declare this ordinance has had its second reading.
Those are all ordinances second reading.
Ordinance is third reading.
There are none.
Committee calls.
Community Development, Monday, April 29th, beginning at 6 o'clock. Joint Finance, Joint CD Finance, immediately following April 29th. Finance, immediately following April 29th. Utility, Safety, and Environment, Wednesday, April 17th, beginning at 6 o'clock p.m. Council Strategic Planning, Monday, May 6th, immediately following council.
Good. Miscellaneous and unfinished business, Ms. Sawerka?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just ask that the clerk's office, I was catching up on the mail in my mailbox and reading through minutes. I think it would be appropriate when members have been excused, that the minutes reflect that they are excused. They seem to be just saying not in attendance, and I think that that's not as correct as it should be. So I've mentioned it to the clerk and the other clerk in the office, and when they are typing the minutes and there have been approved absences, it should say excused absence. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Sawerka. I did receive an email, as well as did Finance Chair Tollett from Judge White in regards to waiving the 500-mile that's required to go to a conference over in California for the National Association for Drug Professionals. So they're going to have a representative from his office out there in May, and we need to waive that.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to waive that 500-mile restriction.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Sierra.
Oh.
You kind of got in front of you there, Mr. Worka. Is there any
Call for
further
the
discussion?
question.
Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Is there any other miscellaneous and unfinished business? Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just to remind everyone, we are discussing our street selection for 2024 on Wednesday at 6 p.m. I'd ask all ward council members to please be in attendance if you're able, and I know you're as excited as I am. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell? Oh, sorry.
Through you,
Mr. Worka.
Sorry, through you, Mr. President. Ms. Mitchell, will we get any information prior to the meeting that we can take a look at?
Mr. Schneider?
Numbers, et cetera? I think that's probably what it all boils down to. Okay,
Very
thank
good.
you.
Ms. Davis?
Well, through you, Mr. President, I was going to thank you for working on a couple of those concrete streets, and they're looking good. Thank you.
Very good. Any other miscellaneous, Ms. Mitchell?
One last thing, Mr. President, through you. Mrs. Phillips, thank you. You pulled double duty tonight, and we really appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Ms. Phillips, for filling in for Mr. Lotko. Any other miscellaneous and unfinished business? Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, seeing none, I'll make a motion for adjournment.
Second. Second by Mr. Sarah. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. This meeting's adjourned.